if in 2 weeks İmamoğlu will get Istanbul back again, a new era is about to begin, not only for Turkey, but also for the region and for the globe.
Welcome to the ELIAMEP podcast series. We're going to discuss in this podcast with Dr. Ahmet Erdi Öztürk, Associate Professor of Politics and International Relations at the London Metropolitan University and non-resident scholar in the Turkey program in ELIAMEP, about the municipal elections in Turkey. Dr. Öztürk, thank you so much for this discussion.
And, my pleasure.
I want to begin by asking you, why are the municipal elections in Turkey so important? What is at stake, actually, in these elections?
Well, thank you so much for having me, first of all. From London, as far as I could follow, this particular local elections, 2024, had begun a little bit colorless and lifeless. I mean, I think I don't know whether it is appropriate to frame it like that or not, but the tragicomic situation that the opposition fell into after the general election 2023, combined with the despair among voters, and had created an impression that the President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's grand hegemony would further strengthen in the local elections as well. But however, less than a month before the election, right now, I can easily say that the situation began to change both in Turkey, and it is quite readable outside the Turkey, because as the possibility of the current mayor of Istanbul, Ekrem İmamoğlu, reclaimed the giant metropolitan named Istanbul and becoming a relatively young and a dynamic alternative for the future steps of Turkey's political atmosphere against President Erdogan. And in this context, I mean, right now, I can read this local election as a kind of an early stage of the struggle or competition between Erdogan and İmamoğlu. What I'm trying to say, I mean, after May 23 elections, there was a prevalent belief in the West and all around the world that the President Erdogan's solo governance until at least 2028, and he would somehow manipulate the system and remain in power for another term if indeed his health permitted. As you know, he's 70 years old. However, many also believe that the President Erdogan would either obstacle Istanbul's metropolitan municipality, Ekrem İmamoğlu, or find a candidate to defeat him regardless of the circumstances. But the current polls, for example, in front of me right now, Metropol survey company's February polls indicate that Ekrem İmamoğlu is heading to Murat Kurum, his competitor, around 3%. And in this regard, I think this local election is also a significant shortcoming for the future of Turkey's political atmosphere, because as you know, around more than 2 decades, Erdogan, one way or another, has managed to defeat all of his counterpartners. But this time, if Ekrem İmamoğlu will get the Istanbul again, this might be the beginning of a new era for Turkey's political history.
Do you believe, Dr. Öztürk, that what President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said, he signaled his willingness to step down after a little over 2 decades in power, that is a trick? He does that to put a kind of psychological pressure to the people.
It is a trick, and it is an old trick of Erdogan, because he used this trick to the best of my knowledge, couple of times in 2011, in 2014, and the last one was in the last general election in 2023. What we can understand from President Erdogan's speech, which began with, "This is my last election," and continued with, "My goal is to hand over my position, the running position, to a trusty one. That the situation is, I mean, from this sentences, I can understand that the situation is not very promising for the People's Alliance. If the situation in Istanbul particularly were not so neck to neck, or Erdogan's team is not about to lose the election, Erdogan would not make such a speech. With this speech, he particularly aims to attract his former supporters who say enough is enough due to the economic crisis, due to the increasing securitization, so on and so forth. And especially when we looked some little political parties who walked through with Erdogan during the general election, right now acting independently, and they are getting lots of votes from Erdogan. And I think all of these, all of these codes from Erdogan, like this is my last election, my goal is to hand over the trust, is just a trick. He's just trying to consolidate his previous supporters one last time. But what we know from the Turkish political history over the last 2 decades, this is a trick, and Erdogan has been using this trick in different ways in many times. So I think it is not realistic to believe that Erdogan's, the honest belief is to step down after 2028. What I know, what I can believe, what I can see, Erdogan is looking for different kind of solutions to consolidate lifelong presidency. Likewise, Russian President Putin has managed to do that.
Do you believe also that in these polls, the clash of personalities is also important? The personality of Imamoglu and also of Yavaş, the mayors of Istanbul and Ankara. And if Imamoglu wins again, do you think that he can run for president? Do you think that maybe at some point in the future Imamoglu could become, or Mansur Yavaş could become president of Turkey?
I'm not favorable to put Ekrem İmamoğlu and Mansur Yavaş within the same basket when we are talking about their personal characteristics and the political behaviors. I think Ekrem İmamoğlu and Mansur Yavaş are quite different personalities. But what I would say that, Mansur Yavaş is coming from a nationalistic background, is a very good mayor for Ankara, for the capital of Turkey, but not very ideological. Not very. It is very hard to see any kind of high politics comments of Mansur Yavaş. But on the other hand, Ekrem İmamoğlu is very well connected with the Western world. And in an Aristotelian concept, as a scholar, I would say that Ekrem İmamoğlu is kind of a political animal. He can play within different lines at the same time. But what I can say for this local election, the alliance that won İmamoğlu the election in 2019 doesn't exist today. Nevertheless, the president's emotional and the political union of opposition voters against the Justice and Development Party is an advantage for İmamoğlu. Currently, particularly Turkish economy is extremely shrinking position, and İmamoğlu's potential victory is not only a victory for Istanbul, actually it would be a victory against Erdogan's governance methodology. İmamoğlu's victory also would not only mean the loss of Istanbul for Erdogan, it would also put Erdogan's political hegemony and his 2028 calculations at risk. Moreover, such a scenario would give İmamoğlu, who has defeated Erdogan more than once, if I'm not mistaken, it will be the 4th time, and this kind of scenario would give him an invisibility that only Erdogan has, and would make it very difficult to disqualify İmamoğlu through non-political means while using judiciary or other state apparatus. So indeed, the personalities are quite important, but the situation, the current conjecture is quite different when we compare 2019 elections. And I think, I mean, when you are making a box match or in a football match, the equality of the teams, the equality of the quality of the teams are quite important. I think at the end of the day, after 20 years, finally, Turkish opposition found an ideal candidate who can compete with President Erdogan in an equal level in terms of discourse, in terms of political ability, in terms of reaching different components of the society, in terms of talking about high politics and the low politics at the same time. I think İmamoğlu and Erdogan would be an equal competitors for the future presidential election if İmamoğlu will manage to get to Istanbul one more time.
What are the biggest issues that are being discussed this time before the elections in Turkey? What do people care about, and what will play the biggest role in winning?
I mean, indeed, there's going to be a change movement in Turkey if the local election will be in the local election. İmamoğlu will get Istanbul. If President Erdogan somehow fails to prevent Ekrem İmamoğlu for winning Istanbul again, he may not fully commend the state apparatus, which is already under his rule. Turkish state capacity, Rosendata, state identity, seeing the potential at the end of the hegemony of the People's Alliance in 4 years, the security judiciary bureaucracy may not stand fully behind President Erdogan. This means that, for instance, İmamoğlu's, if I'm not mistaken, more than 2.5-year prison sentence may not be ever enforced or could be reconfigured in different ways. And in conclusion, if Ekrem İmamoğlu emerged victorious from Istanbul on the evening of March 31st, which seems likely at the moment, according to the latest polls, the local election will make the first leg of the length for the next general election run. In this context, we are also on the brink of entering a period of, as I've been mentioned previously, İmamoğlu versus Erdogan, which had already begun, but what disturbed in the 2023 general election. Now, I can easily say that there is plenty of time until 2028. But if the overall landscape remains unchanged, Erdogan is controlling the general government, most majority of the state structure, but at the same time, İmamoğlu has been controlling Istanbul and became a kind of a alternative figure for Erdogan's hegemony. We could easily say that Turkey is entering its final stage, or we will watch the very last, also quite long episode of Erdogan's movie.
So, Dr. Öztürk, do you think that history can repeat itself? We remember how Recep Tayyip Erdogan began as mayor of Istanbul. We remember that he had a lot of problems because he was imprisoned in the past, and the then establishment tried to stop him from becoming prime minister of Turkey. So do you think that history can repeat itself in Turkey, and from the local front, we can have a new president there he will have a lot of problems becoming president after all, because now of Recep Tayyip Erdogan?
Right. As an associate professor of politics, I would avoid to make a futuristic comments. But at the same time, likewise, my colleague Professor Ayşe Zarakol underlined in her books, if there is a place that we can get a guidance, it is history indeed. But in every single historical period has its own unique issues, unique events, unique critical junctions, turning points, and actors. Indeed, İmamoğlu and Erdogan are quite similar actors, but the situations are quite different. In these circumstances, we have to ask a question to ourselves. What is the new establishment? What is the new realities of Turkey? Indeed, when we compare the late 1990s, when the when Erdogan got the mayorship of Istanbul, and in 2019 when İmamoğlu got the mayorship of Istanbul, the situations, the hegemonies, the power points of Turkey are quite different. But what we are observing is quite similar. There is a relatively new actor. Is likewise Erdogan is coming from Istanbul and trying to defeat Erdogan's long term. But in here, I have to underline one big differences between İmamoğlu and Erdogan. In Erdogan's period, I mean, I wrote it a couple of times and I'm planning to write it until the election. During Erdogan's long march for the presidency of Turkey, he had a story to tell the individuals. He was a symbol to show how the Muslim values can be compatible with the contemporary neoliberal free market economic conditions. He also showed that the European Union criteria can be compatible with his relatively conservative worldview. He had a story to promote himself. But for İmamoğlu, we've been seeing the lack of story right now. What is Ekrem İmamoğlu's big story? To be against Erdogan and his values, his regimes, his hegemony, his competitive authoritarianism, so on and so forth. Yes, these are very visible and real facts, but these are not stories. What Ekrem İmamoğlu offers to the individuals of Turkey, what İmamoğlu offers to the state bureaucracy, what would be the positionality of Turkey in the global system with Ekrem İmamoğlu? What is Ekrem İmamoğlu's economic policy? What is Ekrem İmamoğlu's policy about the increasement of the freedom of speech, democracy, so on and so forth? We do not know these points yet. So in these circumstances, if we can say that the history will repeat itself, we need to see Ekrem İmamoğlu's story, which is still missing, but and it has to be filled as soon as possible after he got the Istanbul election one more time.
And my last question has to do also about Greek-Turkish relations. Do you think that the discussions that we now have, the climate that is better, is going to get even better after the elections, after the municipal elections in Turkey, or it has to do with who wins there?
Indeed, the level of the overlap between domestic politics and foreign policy in Turkey has been increased a very, very peak point during the Justice and Development Party period. But what I know from the Turkish Foreign Ministry, I mean the deputy minister who is related with the European Union relations, for example, Mehmet Kemal Bozay, is very keen to establish very good relationship with Greece. But at the same time, I'm not sure whether there's a harmony between Palace and the foreign ministry in terms of particular issues such as relations with Greece, relation with Armenia, so on and so forth. But what I can see with the new F-16 deal and the possible F-35 deal, Turkey and under the Turkey's current economic crisis, if Turkey would like to create a little bit brighter future in the upcoming years, they have to establish equal, transparent, but at the same time good relations with West. Indeed, Greece is is one of the main components of this Western cap. But at the same time, due to the overlap between domestic politics and foreign policy, if Erdogan will lose Istanbul election in 2 weeks, we may see the increasement of the securitization policies. There is also scenarios regarding to the extraterritorial operation in Syria and in Iraq. We might see a kind of a harsh discourse against West, against quote unquote the historical, I'm using this quote unquote historical enemies of Turkey. So I think still it's a little bit of a blurry area whether there would be a good relationships or some gloomy conditions with Greece. I think the following days will say us what will happen, the relation between Greece and Turkey. But what I would say that one more time, I would like to underline that if in 2 weeks İmamoğlu will get Istanbul back again, a new era is about to begin, not only for Turkey, but also for the region and for the globe.
Dr. Öztürk, thank you very much for this discussion. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot.
This was another ELIAMEP podcast with Odin Linardatou. Recording, editing, and sound editing by Petros Karpathiou. Follow us on the ELIAMEP channels on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and elsewhere.